Before the gods shaped their first heavens, before mortals dreamed their first prayers, something went catastrophically wrong in the fabric of creation itself. The wound did not announce itself with thunder or flame. It simply opened, silent and absolute, and the multiverse would never close it again. The shard of evil tore free from the cosmic war between law and chaos at the exact moment neither force held dominance over the other. Primordial beings clashed in a conflict so vast it preceded the concept of time, their struggle producing ripples that would eventually solidify into planes and dimensions. Within this formless battlefield, a fragment of pure entropic malevolence achieved independent existence. The shard did not fall into the elemental chaos, it infected it. Where stable elemental matter had churned in predictable patterns for eons beyond counting, the shard introduced something new and terrible. Corruption with purpose, hunger with intelligence. The surrounding elemental substrate began to twist, not into new forms, but into antiforms that defied every principle the cosmic architects had established. The corrupted region consumed everything it touched with methodical inevitability. Fire turned black and cold. Water became thick with screaming faces. Earth crumbled into geometries that hurt to perceive. Air solidified into razored crystals that sliced through dimensions. The shard did not merely transform these elements. It perverted them into states that should not exist, creating substance that actively resisted the natural order. The infection spread in all directions simultaneously, converting stable elemental matter into something that fed on chaos itself. Within what scholars would later desperately attempt to measure as centuries, the corrupted zone had grown large enough to qualify as its own nascent plane. The first proto-layer of what would become the abyss took shape not through intentional creation but through the simple fact that corruption, given enough material to consume, eventually creates its own geography. This geography defied every principle the cosmic powers had used to structure reality. Normal planes possessed boundaries, rules, internal consistency. The proto-layer possessed none of these qualities. Its substance shifted without cause. Its laws changed without pattern. Gravity functioned in some regions, reversed in others, and simply ceased to exist in places where the corruption ran deepest. The shard had created a realm that existed in active rebellion against the concept of cosmic order. Even the primordial beings who had witnessed the birth of the planes recognized this corruption as fundamentally different from the chaos they had always known. This was not the creative chaos that spawned possibility. This was chaos that existed only to unmake, to corrupt, to spread. The truth manifested in flesh. From the warped essence of the corrupted region, the first oberiths pulled themselves into existence. These beings did not evolve from earlier life forms because life as understood by gods and mortals did not exist in the proto-abyss. The oberiths simply were, spontaneously generated from concentrated corruption given sufficient density to achieve consciousness. Their forms reflected no natural template. Some possessed geometries that caused madness in those who perceived them fully. Others existed as masses of sensory organs arranged in patterns that violated spatial dimensions. Still others manifested as abstract concepts made hideously concrete, embodiments of suffering or despair or ruination given independence and will. The oberiths represented pure alien malevolence predating every divine creation, and their hunger matched that of the shard itself. Among these primordial horrors, one rose to dominance through methods that combined raw power with something approaching strategy. The Queen of Chaos did not conquer the other oberiths through superior strength alone, though her power exceeded that of any rival. She unified them through shared purpose, convincing disparate horrors that coordinated expansion served their individual hungers better than isolated predation. Under her command, the oberiths transformed from scattered nightmares into organized armies. She established territories within the growing corruption, dividing the proto-layers among her strongest lieutenants while maintaining absolute authority over strategic decisions. Her palace, if such a word could describe a structure built from crystallized screaming, rose from the heart of the first fully formed abyssal layer. From there, she coordinated campaigns that would eventually threaten the stability of existence itself. The layers multiplied with accelerating speed as the Queen consolidated her power. Each new region of elemental corruption that reached critical mass spawned its own distinct realm, and the Shard's influence showed no signs of slowing. By the time the gods finally turned their attention to the growing wound in reality, 47 distinct layers had formed, each reflecting a unique aspect of primordial terror. One layer consisted entirely of living metal that hungered for organic tissue. Another existed as an ocean of acid that dissolved not just matter but concepts, erasing the memory of anything it consumed. A third manifested as an inverted forest where trees grew downward into an infinite abyss while their roots stretched toward a burning black sun. The oberiths shaped these layers according to their individual natures, creating domains that would horrify even other oberiths who entered uninvited. The corruption spread beyond the abyss itself with terrifying efficiency. The first recorded incursion into neighboring planes occurred when abyssal tendrils, extensions of the Shard's influence made manifest, pierced through weakened planar boundaries into the nascent material plane. An entire region of primordial wilderness transformed, overnight into a nightmare landscape where plants screamed and water ran uphill while burning. Mortal life had not yet evolved on most material worlds, but the precursor organisms that would eventually spawn thinking beings died in their billions as abyssal corruption rendered their environments uninhabitable. The tendrils withdrew after devouring everything within reach, but they left behind scars in reality that would never fully heal. These wounds would become natural weak points, places where the barrier between the material plane and the abyss remained perpetually thin. The gods recognized the existential threat immediately upon discovering it. Divine beings who had never agreed on anything before achieved instant consensus that the abyss represented danger to everything they had built or planned to build. The spreading corruption did not simply threaten individual planes or pantheons, it threatened the fundamental structure of reality, the very framework that allowed gods to exist as discrete entities with defined purposes. If the abyss continued expanding unchecked, it would eventually consume the elemental chaos entirely, then spread to the material plane, then to the divine realms themselves. The gods could not allow this. They would not allow this. But stopping an infection that had already achieved such massive scale presented challenges even divine power struggled to address. Primordial beings, those ancient forces that predated even the gods, attempted containment through methods that combined elemental mastery with cosmic engineering. They erected barriers at the boundaries of the spreading corruption, walls of crystallized law designed to resist the abyss's chaotic nature. These barriers worked for a time, holding the infection at bay while the primordials debated more permanent solutions. The abyss, however, had developed its own form of terrible intelligence. The corruption learned to seep through microscopic flaws in the barriers, then widened. Those flaws then shattered entire sections when concentrated force proved more effective than patient infiltration. The barriers failed one after another, each collapse allowing the abyss to surge forward and claim new territory. The primordials rebuilt. The abyss broke through again. The cycle repeated until even the primordials acknowledged that containment might prove impossible. Everything was about to change. The Queen of Chaos directed the first coordinated assault on planes beyond the abyss, proving that the corruption had evolved beyond passive expansion into active conquest. Her armies poured through the largest breach in the failing barriers, oberiths by the thousands supported by corrupted elementals and entities too twisted to classify. They struck at the elemental plane of air first, targeting the magnificent citadels of the Wind Dukes of Arca. The Wind Dukes represented law incarnate, beings of pure order who had structured themselves according to mathematical principles and geometric perfection. The Queen chose them specifically because their destruction would send an unmistakable message to all forces of order. The abyss was not a passive phenomenon to be contained. It was an active threat that would hunt down and devour everything opposed to chaos. The oberiths established dominion over their 47 layers with terrifying permanence. Each demon lord, as they would later be called, ruled absolutely within their chosen domain. Some built cities from materials that should not exist, creating twisted parodies of civilization where hierarchies based on strength and cruelty replaced any semblance of justice or mercy. Others left their layers in states of pure anarchic wilderness, allowing the landscape itself to consume weak demons, while the strong adapted or died trying. Still others constructed realms of such specific horror that even other oberiths entered only when absolutely necessary. One lord built a layer where time flowed differently in every location, creating zones where visitors experienced centuries in moments or moments in centuries. Another shaped their domain into a living labyrinth that rearranged itself to maximize the suffering of anyone trapped within. The variety of torments proved as infinite as the layers themselves. The gods launched their first coordinated assault on the abyss, with armies drawn from every pantheon willing to contribute forces. Celestial beings marched alongside elemental warriors, archons fought beside asimons, and divine champions from a dozen different traditions set aside theological differences to face the common threat. They struck at 3 separate layers simultaneously, attempting to establish beachheads from which larger campaigns could be launched. The assault achieved temporary success. The first wave of celestial forces penetrated deep into abyssal territory, destroying lesser demons by the thousands and forcing even powerful oberiths to retreat before overwhelming divine power. The gods believed they had achieved the momentum needed for total victory. They were wrong. The abyss adapted. Demon reinforcements poured in from layers the gods had not known existed, overwhelming the celestial beachheads through sheer numbers. The oberiths revealed powers the gods had not suspected they possessed, abilities that corrupted divine essence itself and turned celestial warriors into screaming husks. Worst of all, the abyss demonstrated its fundamental nature by spawning new demons faster than the gods could destroy them. Every corrupted soul fed the plane's power. Every drop of divine blood spilled on abyssal soil strengthened the local demons. The celestial armies retreated in disarray, their losses catastrophic and their objectives unachieved. The gods had contained the abyss but failed to destroy it, and the shard at the corruption's heart pulsed with satisfaction at this proof of its permanence. The failure marked the beginning of eternal vigilance against the abyss rather than hope for its elimination. The gods established watchtowers at key planar junctures, stationed permanent garrisons at weak points in reality, and created orders of celestial guardians dedicated solely to monitoring abyssal activity. They accepted that the corruption would exist as a permanent feature of the multiverse, an eternal wound that could be managed but never healed. The shard of evil had achieved its purpose beyond any measure its original creators might have imagined. It had infected reality so thoroughly that removing it would require unmaking significant portions of existence itself. The gods could not accept such a cost. The abyss would endure, growing slowly but inevitably, its infinite layers spawning new horrors with each passing age, while the forces of order maintained their desperate vigil against its spread. The Queen of Chaos required a weapon capable of destroying order itself. Among her oberith generals, she found a creature of such unprecedented savagery that even she recognized his potential to reshape the cosmic balance. His name was Miska, and he would nearly succeed in unmaking reality. Miska the wolf spider combined the worst aspects of lupine predators and arachnid hunters into a single monstrous form that stood 3 times the height of a giant. His upper body retained wolfish features, with jaws capable of crushing adamantine and eyes that burned with crimson hunger. His lower half sprouted 8 segmented legs covered in chitinous plates that deflected all but the most powerful weapons. The Queen elevated him from common demon to supreme general through rituals that bound portions of her own essence into his frame, making him an extension of her will while amplifying his natural capacity for violence. Miska commanded oberith legions with brutal efficiency, understanding instinctively that demons respected only strength and that hesitation meant death. Under his leadership, the abyssal armies, transformed from chaotic mobs into coordinated forces capable of sustained campaigns against organized opposition. The Wind Dukes of Arca represented everything the Queen of Chaos despised. These beings of living law had structured their entire civilization according to mathematical principles, building their 7 celestial citadels at precise geometric intervals across the plane of air. Each citadel housed 10,000 Wind Dukes and served as both fortress and philosophical academy where the principles of order were studied, refined, and enforced. Their society functioned without conflict because every member understood their exact place within the cosmic hierarchy. Their magic drew upon fundamental laws of reality, shaping air and light into constructs of perfect symmetry. The Queen targeted them not merely as obstacles but as symbols, knowing that shattering the citadels would demonstrate Chaos's superiority over order to every plane in the multiverse. Miska led the first assault on the citadel of Icosiol with 200,000 oberith warriors, supported by corrupted air elementals and entities spawned specifically for aerial combat. The Wind Dukes had prepared defensive formations based on predicted attack vectors, geometric patterns designed to funnel invaders into killing zones where concentrated law magic would annihilate them. Miska ignored these predictions entirely, splitting his forces into 17 separate strike groups that attacked from mathematically irrational angles. The Wind Dukes' perfect formations collapsed when Chaos refused to follow the patterns Order had anticipated. Miska personally breached the citadel's primary gate, his 8 legs allowing him to scale walls while his claws tore through defensive wards that should have been impregnable. Icosiol fell within 3 days, its inhabitants slaughtered and its geometric perfection reduced to rubble that the Queen ordered scattered across the abyss as trophies. The second and third citadels, Pentadrone and Hexad, lasted longer but ultimately suffered identical fates. The Wind Dukes adapted their tactics after Icosiol's destruction, abandoning rigid formations in favor of more fluid responses. They called upon allies from other lawful planes, summoning Archons and Inevitables to reinforce their positions. Miska countered by bringing additional abyssal layers into the war, opening portals that spewed fresh demon reinforcements directly onto the battlefield whenever his forces wavered. The siege of Pentadrone lasted 6 months, ending when Miska discovered the citadel's structural keystone and personally shattered it, causing the entire fortress to collapse inward on itself. Hexad fell 3 weeks later when oberiths infiltrators corrupted its foundational wards from within, turning the citadel's own defensive magic against its inhabitants. 3 of 7 citadels destroyed. The Wind Dukes faced potential extinction. The Queen of Chaos had never been closer to total victory. The Queen channeled abyssal power directly into Miska during a ritual that lasted 7 days and required the sacrifice of 100 lesser demon lords. She opened conduits between Miska's essence and the deepest reaches of the abyss, allowing raw chaos to flow through him without destroying his physical form. The transformation granted him abilities that transcended normal demon capabilities. He could teleport between any location touched by shadow. His presence alone corrupted lawful beings, turning paladins into murderers and inevitables into malfunctioning wrecks. His roar shattered protective magic across entire battlefields. Most terrifying of all, he gained the ability to temporarily control and direct chaotic forces that even the Queen herself struggled to predict. Miska became more than a general. He became a living manifestation of the abyss's hunger to consume all order. The final battle at the plains of Pesh represented the largest military engagement the multiverse had witnessed since the Primordial Wars. Miska commanded armies drawn from 60 abyssal layers simultaneously, demon lords setting aside their rivalries to participate in what the Queen promised would be Order's final defeat. The surviving Wind Dukes gathered every ally they could summon, creating a coalition that included celestial beings, elemental princes, and even some gods willing to intervene directly. The plains of Pesh stretched across a neutral territory between law and chaos, flat expanses of crystallized possibility where reality remained fluid enough to accommodate both ordered and chaotic forces without automatically destroying either. The armies met at dawn on a day that scholars across multiple planes would later record as the hinge point of cosmic history. The battle raged for 40 days without pause. Miska's forces nearly broke through the coalition lines 17 times, and each time last-minute reinforcements or desperate heroics pushed them back. The Contact Wind Dukes unveiled their ultimate weapon on the 37th day, a creation they had labored over in secret even as their citadels burned. They called it the Rod of Law, a 7-segmented artifact forged from crystallized order magic bound together by primordial principles that predated even the gods. Each segment represented a different aspect of law: unity, hierarchy, stability, precision, enforcement, inevitability, and absolute truth. Together, these segments created a weapon specifically designed to counter chaotic essence, capable of imposing order on even the most entropic substances. The rod could not simply injure Miska. It could unmake him by forcing his chaotic nature into lawful patterns that would tear him apart from within. War became sacrifice. The Wind Dukes, who wielded the Rod of Law, knew they would not survive its activation. The artifact required 7 wielders, 1 for each segment, and channeling its full power would consume their life force completely. They accepted this cost without hesitation, because allowing Miska to continue his rampage meant certain doom for all ordered existence. The 7 chosen Wind Dukes positioned themselves in perfect geometric alignment, forming a heptagon with Miska at its center. They activated the rod simultaneously, and reality screamed. Pure law magic, concentrated beyond anything the multiverse had experienced, struck the wolf spider from 7 directions at once. His chaotic essence fought against the imposed order, creating feedback that incinerated everything within a mile radius. The 7 Wind Dukes disintegrated instantly, their sacrifice complete. Miska survived, but barely. The rod had torn his essence partially out of phase with normal reality, creating a dimensional rift that trapped him in a state between existence and non-existence. The Rod of Law shattered from the strain of imprisoning Miska, its 7 segments breaking apart and scattering across the multiverse. 1 fragment landed in the abyss itself, burning a crater of imposed order into the chaotic landscape. 2 fell to the material plane, embedding themselves in different worlds separated by vast cosmic distances. The remaining 4 scattered to unknown locations, their magical signatures masked by the violent energies released during the battle. Each fragment retained a portion of the rod's power, and legends would later claim that reuniting all 7 pieces could restore the artifact to its original state. The scattering represented both tragedy and necessity. The rod had accomplished its purpose by stopping Miska, but its destruction ensured that no one force could ever wield such concentrated law magic again. The Queen of Chaos felt Miska's imprisonment through the connection she had forged with him during his empowerment. The feedback nearly destroyed her, burning away significant portions of her accumulated power and leaving her weakened beyond any state she had experienced in eons. She retreated into the deepest reaches of the abyss, withdrawing to a layer so remote that even other demon lords could not locate it without her permission. Her hatred intensified rather than diminished, but her ability to act on that hatred had been crippled. The oberith civilization she had unified fractured immediately without her direct leadership. Demon lords who had cooperated during the war against the Wind Dukes turned on each other within weeks, each seeking to claim territory and power in the resulting vacuum. The age of oberith unity ended not with external conquest but with internal collapse. Miska's prison became the 663rd layer of the abyss through processes that demonstrated the plane's fundamental strangeness. The dimensional rift trapping him existed in multiple locations simultaneously, creating a layer that was both nowhere and everywhere within the abyssal hierarchy. Those who entered the layer found themselves in an endless wasteland where 8-legged shadows stalked. Between broken spires of frozen chaos, Miska himself remained locked at the layer's center, his consciousness trapped in eternal rage, while his physical form slowly regenerated from the rod's damage. The oberith armies that had followed him died or scattered, leaderless and purposeless without their general. Some scholars in later ages would claim that Miska's imprisonment rather than death represented the Wind Duke's greatest mistake, arguing that his eventual escape remained a possibility that continued to threaten cosmic stability. The fragments of the Rod of Law began corrupting abyssal matter wherever they landed within that plane. The piece that struck the abyss created a spreading zone of imposed order, a circular region where chaos could not exist in its natural state. Demons who entered this zone found their forms stabilizing, their random mutations ceasing, their very nature forced into consistent patterns. This terrified them more than any physical pain could. The corrupted region expanded slowly but inevitably, consuming a few hundred yards of abyssal landscape each year. Demon lords attempted to destroy the fragment through every method they could devise, but law magic of such concentration resisted chaotic assault by its fundamental nature. Eventually they simply avoided the region, allowing it to grow while praying it never reached critical mass. The fragment would remain embedded in the abyss for thousands of years, a permanent reminder that even in chaos's native realm, order could stake its claim. The defeat at the plains of Pesh did not destroy the abyss, but it shattered any pretense of coordinated demon expansion into other planes. The oberith lords who survived returned to their lairs and immediately began consolidating personal power rather than pursuing collective goals. Alliances dissolved, treaties meant nothing. The carefully structured hierarchy the Queen of Chaos had maintained collapsed into the very anarchy the oberiths claimed to champion. Some demon lords interpreted this as victory, arguing that true chaos required no unity, and that the Queen's attempt to organize demons had betrayed their essential nature. Others recognized it as catastrophic defeat, disguised as philosophical consistency. Regardless of interpretation, the practical result remained identical. The abyss turned inward, demon lords fighting demons, while the rest of the multiverse caught its breath and rebuilt from decades of sustained assault. The wolf spider's rage never diminished within his prison lair, and every demon in the abyss could feel it like a distant earthquake that never quite arrived. His failure haunted the Queen of Chaos in her hidden sanctuary. The shattered rod promised future conflicts over its fragments. The weakened oberith civilization created opportunities that newer, hungrier forces would soon exploit. The Age of Unity had ended, but the abyss itself endured, infinite and patient and eternally hungry for the next opportunity to spread its corruption across creation. The abyss discovered a new method of reproduction that would prove far more efficient than anything the oberiths had achieved. Mortal souls twisted by corruption began manifesting as demons, and their numbers grew exponentially with each generation. The plane was about to undergo a revolution that would reshape its entire power structure. The first Tanari emerged spontaneously from souls so steeped in chaotic evil that death could not deliver them to any afterlife but the abyss itself. These corrupted spirits did not petition to become demons through deals or rituals. They simply arrived in the abyss and transformed immediately upon contact with its substance. Their mortal memories dissolved within moments, replaced by instinctive understanding of abyssal hierarchies and insatiable hunger for advancement through violence. Unlike oberiths who had spawned from pure corruption, Tanari retained certain aspects of mortal form. They possessed recognizable anatomies, even if twisted into monstrous configurations. They communicated through language rather than psychic assault. Most importantly, they reproduced rapidly, breeding true when two Tanari mated and creating offspring that matured within years rather than centuries. The oberiths had spent eons spawning perhaps 10,000 of their kind. The Tanari would number in the millions within a handful of generations. The adaptability of Tanari exceeded anything the rigid oberith hierarchy could match. Where oberiths remained locked into forms determined by the specific corrupted essence that spawned them, Tanari evolved and mutated based on their experiences and achievements. Of rocks that survived enough battles might transform into a glabrazu. A glabrazu that accumulated sufficient power could ascend to Marilith form. The strongest and most cunning could eventually become Ballas, walking infernos of destruction that commanded lesser demons through sheer, intimidating presence. This evolutionary flexibility meant Tanari adapted to challenges far faster than oberiths could respond. When oberiths deployed specific oberith forms optimized for certain combat conditions, Tanari simply evolved counters within a few generations. The Abyss itself seemed to favor this new demon species, shaping them more efficiently than it had ever shaped the alien oberiths. The first Tanari lords emerged through methods that horrified the established oberith rulers. Rather than manifesting fully formed from concentrated corruption, these new demon lords clawed their way up from the lowest ranks through accumulated violence and successful treachery. They seized control of layers not through primordial claim but through conquest and political maneuvering. The oberith hierarchy had been based on age and alien power. The Tanari hierarchy based itself purely on demonstrated capability to dominate. This fundamental difference in philosophy meant that young, aggressive Tanari lords could challenge ancient oberiths and occasionally win through superior tactical thinking rather than raw supernatural might. Demogorgon manifested in the Abyss without warning or precedent, his existence a mystery that scholars would debate for millennia. Some claimed he was the first true Tanari, spawned directly from the Abyss rather than from a corrupted mortal soul. Others insisted he arrived from somewhere outside the known planes, a refugee from a reality even more twisted than the Abyss itself. Regardless of origin, his appearance shook the demon hierarchy immediately. His twin heads granted him capabilities no single-minded demon could match. One head planned while the other attacked. One negotiated while the other prepared ambush. When psychic assault struck him, the two minds distributed the damage between them, making him effectively immune to mental domination that felled other demon lords routinely. He claimed an unoccupied layer within his first decade of existence and fortified it against all challengers through a combination of brutal efficiency and unexpected tactical brilliance. Orcus arose less than a century after Demogorgon, marking the beginning of what would become the Abyss's most enduring rivalry. Where Demogorgon represented pure physical and mental dominance, Orcus brought something genuinely new to abyssal warfare. He understood death not as mere cessation but as a state to be exploited and controlled. His lair, Thanatos, transformed under his rule into a realm where even demons could experience true mortality rather than mere banishment back to the Abyss for reformation. Orcus discovered methods to prevent demon essence from regenerating after destruction, effectively killing demons permanently rather than temporarily removing them from battle. This breakthrough terrified every demon lord because it meant Orcus possessed the power to permanently end rivals rather than merely defeating them. The balance of power in the Abyss had always assumed eventual regeneration. Orcus shattered that assumption. The two demon lords established rival power bases on separate layers, each building armies and accumulating resources for inevitable conflict. Demogorgon fortified the layer that would become known as the Gaping Maw, constructing a palace called Abysm at its center and surrounding it with defensive perimeters that channeled attackers into zones where his strategic brilliance could be applied most effectively. Orcus transformed Thanatos into a necropolis of continent-spanning graveyards where the remains of his enemies served as both trophies and raw materials for his undead experiments. Neither demon lord moved openly against the other during these early centuries, but their agents clashed constantly across dozens of layers, testing capabilities and probing for weaknesses that might prove exploitable in future direct confrontation. Something ancient stirred in response to the Tanari. Ascension. The oberith known as Pale Night ranked among the most powerful of her species, a being of such alien horror that merely perceiving her true form could shatter mortal minds beyond any hope of recovery. She had remained neutral during the war against the Wind Dukes, watching Miska's defeat with detached interest while consolidating her own power base. The rise of the Tanari, however, threatened everything the oberiths had built. Pale Night recognized that these new demons would eventually displace her entire species unless decisive action eliminated them before they grew too numerous to stop. She began preparing a ritual of cosmic extinction, a working of magic so vast and terrible that it would scour every Tanari from existence while leaving oberiths untouched. The ritual required 7 years of constant preparation and the sacrifice of 13 lesser oberith lords who contributed their essence to fuel the working. Demogorgon learned of the ritual through his extensive spy network 6 months before its completion. He understood immediately that Pale Knight's success would mean not just his own death but the permanent end of Tanari as a species. The threat forced him into temporary alliance with other Tanari lords who normally would have ranked among his greatest rivals. They pooled their resources and armies for a coordinated assault on Pale Knight's stronghold, a fortress called Anaphoria, located on one of the deepest oberith-controlled layers. The assault force numbered 200,000 demons, the largest Tanari army ever assembled for a single objective. They struck during the ritual's final phase, when Pale Knight had committed so much of her essence to the working that she could not easily defend herself. The battle for Anaphoria lasted 3 days of continuous slaughter. Pale Knight's oberith defenders fought with desperate ferocity, understanding that their species' survival depended on protecting the ritual long enough for completion. The Tanari pushed forward with equal desperation, knowing that failure meant extinction. The fortress walls shattered under repeated assault. The defenders fell back to interior positions, making the attackers pay for every corridor with hundreds of demon lives. Demogorgon personally led the final push into Pale Knight's ritual chamber, his twin heads coordinating his movements with inhuman precision as he carved through the last oberith guardians. He reached Pale Knight herself, moments before the ritual's completion, and struck with both heads simultaneously, one tearing into her physical form, while the other disrupted the ritual's energy flows through precisely calculated psychic assault. Pale Knight's avatar collapsed as the ritual failed catastrophically, its accumulated energy detonating outward and destroying Anaphoria completely. The fortress and everything within 3 miles simply ceased to exist, erased from reality by magical feedback of unprecedented scale. Pale Knight herself survived in reduced form, her consciousness retreating to a hidden redoubt where she would spend the next 1,000 years recovering. Her defeat marked the symbolic end of oberith supremacy. The most powerful oberith had attempted to destroy all Tanari and failed. The balance had shifted decisively in favor of the new demon species. Grazet entered the abyss under circumstances that remain disputed across multiple scholarly traditions. Some accounts claim he was originally a devil who defected from the 9 hells, bringing with him military knowledge and strategic understanding far exceeding typical demonic capabilities. Other sources insist he was Tanari from the beginning, his unusual discipline and intelligence representing natural variation within demon evolution. A few fringe theories propose even stranger origins, suggesting connections to entities from planes beyond the standard cosmological model. Regardless of his true nature, Graz's arrival coincided with a period of maximum chaos in abyssal politics. He exploited this chaos masterfully, claiming not 1 but 3 connected layers known collectively as Azagrat through a combination of seduction, bribery, political manipulation, and selective violence that demonstrated capabilities most demons simply did not possess. His consolidation of Azagrat proceeded with methodical efficiency that seemed almost undemonic in its careful planning. Where most demon lords ruled through fear and random violence, Grazd implemented actual governance. He established laws within his realm and enforced them consistently. He created a functioning economy based on soul trade and magical resources. He built cities that persisted for decades rather than collapsing into chaos within years. Most shocking of all, he negotiated lasting alliances with other demon lords through treaties he actually honored when doing so served his interests. This approach granted him influence far exceeding his raw power level, as other demon lords found they could actually negotiate with Grazest and expect agreements to hold. He became a power broker. The demon lord others approached when they needed mediation or when they sought alliances against common enemies. The war of ripe flesh erupted when accumulated tensions between oberiths and Tanari finally exploded into open species-wide conflict. The war had no single cause and no clear beginning, emerging instead from thousands of individual clashes that escalated until every demon lord had chosen sides. Roughly 200 abyssal layers became active battlegrounds where Oberith and Tanari armies slaughtered each other by the millions. The conflict demonstrated definitively which species held the advantage. Oberiths possessed superior individual power and more potent magical abilities, but Tanari overwhelmed them through sheer numbers and evolutionary adaptability. For every Oberith warrior, 10 Tanari stood ready to fight. When Oberiths developed new weapons or tactics, Tanari adapted counters within years. The war dragged on for 3 centuries of constant bloodshed before the outcome became inevitable. The Tanari achieved final victory not through superior combat, but through superior corruption. They perfected methods of soul corruption that transformed mortal evil into demon reinforcements far more efficiently than Oberiths had ever managed. Every mortal world that fell deeper into depravity produced thousands of new Tanari, ensuring that demon armies could replace losses faster than oberiths could inflict them. The oberiths fought brilliantly and died stubbornly, but mathematics doomed them. Their species simply could not reproduce quickly enough to match Tanari expansion. By the war's end, Oberith numbers had declined to perhaps a tenth of their pre-war population, while Tanari emerged more numerous and powerful than ever. The remaining oberiths faced a choice between submission and extinction. Most chose survival, swearing allegiance to Tanari lords in exchange for continued existence. They retained positions of influence in some cases, serving as advisors or specialized operatives whose alien abilities proved useful for specific tasks. A few refused submission and retreated to hidden layers where they plotted revenge that would never materialize. Pale Night eventually emerged from her recovery to find the age of oberiths permanently ended. She accepted reality and negotiated her own position within the new hierarchy, becoming one of the few oberiths to retain significant power under Tanari dominance. The Abyss had transformed completely, its character shifting from primordial alien horror to calculated malevolence that understood mortal weakness intimately because it had originated from mortal corruption. The Abyss under Tanari rule proved far more dangerous to the wider multiverse than it had been under Oberith control. The alien oberiths had been comprehensible only with difficulty, their motives and methods so strange that defending against them required understanding utterly foreign psychology. The Tanari, however, thought like mortals because they had been mortal. They understood temptation, ambition, greed, and pride from personal experience. They could corrupt mortal souls with precision because they remembered what it felt like to be corrupted. The shift from Oberith to Tanari dominance marked the moment when the Abyss stopped being a bizarre cosmic anomaly and became an active predator specifically targeting mortal civilization across every material plane world it could reach. The 9 Hells had watched the Abyss expand for eons with calculating patience, but patience eventually gives way to opportunity. Asmodeus recognized that chaos, for all its destructive power, possessed exploitable weaknesses that disciplined infernal forces could leverage. The discovery of a pathway between the planes would ignite a war that would never end. Asmodeus personally surveyed the planar boundaries between Bator and the Abyss, seeking vulnerabilities in the cosmic membrane that separated law from chaos. His agents had reported fluctuations in planar stability, temporary weaknesses that appeared and disappeared without discernible pattern. The Lord of the Nine spent decades analyzing these fluctuations until he identified their source. The river Styx, that ancient waterway of forgetting that flowed through multiple lower planes, had begun carving new tributaries through weakened planar substrates. One such tributary now connected Avernus, the first layer of the 9 Hells, directly to Pazunia, the first layer of the Abyss. The connection remained narrow and unstable, but Asmodeus understood immediately that this represented both threat and opportunity. Demons could use the river to invade the Hells. Devils could use it to strike at the Abyss. Whoever controlled the Styx crossing would hold strategic advantage in any coming conflict. The decision to launch a preemptive strike against the Abyss represented calculated risk rather than impulsive aggression. Asmodeus convened his archdukes and presented his analysis with characteristic precision. The abyss spawned demons faster than any force could destroy them, but their chaotic nature made them fundamentally disorganized. A disciplined infernal army could achieve victories through superior tactics that demon hordes could not match through mere numbers. More importantly, allowing demons unrestricted access to the Styx meant eventual demonic assault on the nine hells themselves. Better to fight in the abyss where destruction served infernal interests than to fight in Bator where every shattered fortress represented irreplaceable loss. The archdukes voted unanimously for war, though several privately questioned whether Asmodeus had revealed his complete strategic thinking. The infernal invasion force that crossed the Styx into Pazunia numbered 30,000 devils in perfectly organized legions. Pit fiends commanded Erinya's squadrons, while bone devils coordinated with bearded devil shock troops. Every unit understood its tactical role precisely. Every commander knew the battle plan 3 moves in advance. The devils emerged from the Styx onto the blasted plains of Pazunia and immediately began constructing fortifications, establishing a beachhead with geometric precision while scout units surveyed the surrounding terrain. Demon observers initially dismissed the invaders as insignificant, assuming that mere thousands of devils could be overwhelmed by the millions of demons that inhabited Pazunia alone. They failed to appreciate how much damage 30,000 disciplined troops could inflict before being destroyed. The first recorded battle of what would become known as the Blood War erupted 3 days after the infernal beachhead's establishment. 50,000 demons surged toward the devil fortifications in a massive wave, various demon types mixed together without organization or coordinated tactics. They expected to overwhelm the defenders through sheer mass, drowning the devils in demon flesh until nothing remained. The devils met the charge with prepared positions and overlapping fields of fire. Infernal artillery carved channels through the demon ranks. Disciplined pike formations held against charges that should have broken any line. Erinya's flying units struck demon flanks with precision strikes that decapitated leadership before retreating beyond retaliation range. The battle lasted 18 hours and ended with 47,000 demons destroyed against 3,000 devil casualties. The mathematics shocked every demon lord who learned the results. The tactical disparity became even more apparent as the devils expanded their beachhead. Where demons attacked in wild rushes, devils advanced in measured steps with secured supply lines. Where demons abandoned wounded comrades, devils evacuated their casualties for battlefield resurrection and rapid redeployment. Where demon lords squabbled over who commanded which units, devil hierarchies functioned with absolute clarity. The infernal forces captured and fortified key terrain features, establishing strongpoints that demons could not dislodge without accepting catastrophic losses. Within 6 months, the devils controlled 100 square miles of Pazunia and had begun constructing permanent fortifications that suggested they intended to stay indefinitely. Demogorgon's personal intervention changed the battle's character completely. The Prince of Demons had been consolidating power on his own layer when news reached him of the infernal invasion. He recognized immediately that successful devil occupation of Pazunia would grant them a permanent foothold in the abyss, a base from which they could launch attacks deeper into demon territory. This could not be tolerated. Demogorgon personally led 200,000 demons across the dimensional boundaries separating his lair from Pazunia, bringing with him creatures specifically selected for their destructive capabilities rather than mere numbers. His twin heads coordinated the assault with unexpected sophistication, dividing his forces into multiple strike groups that hit devil positions from several directions simultaneously. The devils had prepared for massive demon assault, but not for assault directed by genuine strategic intelligence. Demogorgon identified the Devil Supply Depot as the critical vulnerability in their defensive network and concentrated overwhelming force against it while launching diversionary attacks elsewhere. The depot fell within hours, cutting off ammunition and reinforcement for the entire Devil position. Without supplies, even disciplined troops could not hold against sustained assault. The Devil commanders recognized their situation and executed a fighting retreat back to the Styx, abandoning their hard-won fortifications rather than allowing their legions to be destroyed completely. Demogorgon pursued them to the river's edge, his forces slaughtering fleeing devils until the last infernal troops crossed back into Avernus. The battle had cost the demons nearly 90,000 casualties, but they had ejected the invaders from Pazunia. Victory proved temporary. Bel emerged as the Nine Hells' supreme military commander through his performance in the expanding conflict. This pit fiend possessed tactical genius that rivaled Demogorgon's own capabilities, understanding both large-scale strategy and small-unit tactics with equal brilliance. He studied the failed Pazunia invasion and identified exactly where the operation had gone wrong. The Devils had treated the assault as a raid rather than a proper invasion, committing insufficient forces to hold territory against determined counterattack. Bel proposed a different approach. Rather than attempting to conquer and hold abyssal territory, infernal forces would conduct ongoing raids designed to inflict maximum demon casualties while minimizing devil losses. The goal was not territorial gain but attrition, bleeding the abyss through 1,000 cuts until demon lords could not ignore the threat. Bel's strategy proved devastatingly effective over the following decades. Devil strike forces crossed the Styx repeatedly, hitting demon positions across Pazunia and several deeper layers before retreating back to the Hells with minimal losses. Each raid killed hundreds or thousands of demons while costing perhaps dozens of devils. The mathematics favored the attackers because devils returned to the Nine Hells for resurrection while demons had to reform in the abyss, a process that took significantly longer. Bel personally commanded 17 major raids, each one a tactical masterpiece that accomplished its objectives with surgical precision. Demon lords found themselves forced to commit troops to defend against potential devil incursions rather than pursuing their own schemes, disrupting abyssal politics and preventing demons from launching coordinated attacks on other planes. The Yugoloth race revealed itself to both sides as the conflict intensified, offering their services as mercenaries willing to fight for whichever side paid better. These fiends claimed neutrality in the cosmic conflict between law and chaos, interested only in profit and their own inscrutable agenda. Yugoloths possessed capabilities that neither devils nor demons could easily replicate. Their magic combined aspects of both lawful and chaotic energy, making them unpredictable opponents. Their mercenary companies included specialists in infiltration, assassination, siege warfare, and battlefield magic. Most importantly, they could cross planar boundaries more easily than either devils or demons, making them ideal for special operations that regular troops could not accomplish. Both sides employed Yugoloths extensively despite knowing that mercenary loyalty lasted only as long as payment continued. Devils hired Yugoloth companies to raid deep into the abyss, targeting specific demon lords or destroying key resources. Demons employed Yugoloths to strike at infernal supply lines or assassinate devil commanders. The mercenaries played both sides expertly, sometimes fighting for demons one month and devils the next. Their presence introduced an element of strategic uncertainty into every major operation because neither side could ever be certain whether their Yugoloth allies might switch sides mid-battle if offered better terms. Some scholars suspected the Yugoloths deliberately prolonged the blood war through their mercenary actions, ensuring steady employment by preventing either side from achieving decisive victory. The fortress of Darkspine rose on the plains of Pazunia as the most ambitious infernal construction project ever attempted in the abyss. Bel recognized that temporary raids, while effective, could not prevent eventual demon counterattacks into the Nine Hells. The Devils needed a permanent forward base in the abyss, a fortress so powerful that demons could not destroy it without committing forces that would leave other layers vulnerable. Darkspine took a decade to construct, built from basalt quarried in Avernus and transported through the Styx by infernal engineers who worked under constant demon harassment. The finished fortress stretched across 12 square miles, its walls 100 feet thick and reinforced with magic that resisted both physical and supernatural assault. 10,000 devils garrisoned Darkspine permanently, supplied through secured Styx routes and supported by artillery capable of destroying demon armies at extreme range. Demon lords united briefly in their determination to destroy Darkspine before it could become fully operational. Orcus led the primary assault, bringing 200,000 demons, including significant numbers of his undead creations. The siege lasted 9 months of continuous fighting. Demons threw themselves against Darkspine's walls in waves, accepting horrific casualties in exchange for minimal progress. The fortress's defenders rotated units through the Styx, replacing exhausted troops with fresh reinforcements, while demons had to fight until destroyed. Orcus personally breached the outer walls during the siege's 7th month, his Wand of Orcus disintegrating entire wall sections, but devil counterattacks sealed the breaches before demons could exploit them. The siege finally broke when Zariel, who commanded Avernus at the time, led a relief force of 50,000 devils through the Styx to attack the besieging demons from behind. Orcus retreated rather than fighting a two-front battle, and Darkspine remained standing. Orcus launched his retaliatory invasion of Avernus with 800,000 demons, the largest single army the Abyss had ever deployed for offensive operations. He understood that the devils would continue pressuring demon-held territory as long as they faced no serious threat to their own realm. The invasion would demonstrate that the Blood War involved mutual threat rather than one-sided demon vulnerability. Orcus's forces crossed the Styx in 3 massive waves, overwhelming forward devil positions through sheer numbers before the infernal chain of command could respond effectively. The demon army swept across the blasted plains of Avernus, destroying everything in its path while heading directly toward the Bronze Citadel, Zariel's primary fortress. The siege of the Bronze Citadel lasted 3 years and became legend even among the countless battles of the Blood War. Zariel refused to abandon her fortress despite Orcus commanding forces that outnumbered her garrison 10-1. She understood that evacuating would grant demons a permanent foothold in Avernus, potentially destabilizing all of Bator. The Citadel's defenses held through brilliant leadership and devastating magic. Zariel personally flew into Lictor, battle repeatedly, her sword carving through demon ranks while inspiring her troops to feats of suicidal bravery. Orcus matched her personally, the 2 commanders dueling 3 separate times during the siege without either achieving decisive advantage. The Bronze Citadel's walls shattered and were rebuilt. Its outer fortifications fell and were retaken. Casualties mounted into the hundreds of thousands on both sides. Asmodeus finally intervened personally when the siege entered its 4th year, recognizing that Orcus's army had grown too large and too entrenched to be expelled through conventional military operations. The Lord of the Nine appeared on the battlefield without warning, his mere presence causing weaker demons to flee in existential terror. He challenged Orcus directly, offering single combat to determine the invasion's outcome. Orcus accepted, understanding that refusing would mark him as coward before every demon in his army. The duel lasted 17 hours and devastated the surrounding landscape, both combatants wielding power that reshaped reality with each strike. Asmodeus eventually forced Orcus to retreat through superior skill rather than overwhelming force, demonstrating that the Lord of the Nine could destroy the Demon Lord if he committed fully to the effort. Orcus withdrew his army back to the Abyss, his invasion having failed, but his reputation for military capability enhanced. The Blood War stabilized into perpetual conflict that both sides gradually accepted as permanent feature of their existence. Neither demons nor devils possessed the capability to achieve total victory over the other. The Abyss spawned demons faster than devils could destroy them, while the Nine Hells' organizational superiority prevented demons from conquering infernal territory. The conflict reached equilibrium, where both sides committed massive resources to fighting each other while maintaining sufficient strength to defend against potential threats from other planes. Fortresses changed hands repeatedly. Armies clashed across Pazunia and Avernus in battles that killed millions. Individual commanders rose to prominence through battlefield achievement, then fell when superior opponents or unlucky circumstances ended their careers. The mortal worlds began feeling the Blood War's effects, as both sides recognized that recruiting mortal souls offered the most efficient method of expanding their armies. Devils tempted mortals with contracts offering power in exchange for infernal service after death. Demons corrupted mortals through pure evil, dragging souls to the abyss through accumulated sin. Every mortal who died in service to law swelled the ranks of the 9 hells. Every mortal who embraced chaos strengthened the abyss. The cosmic conflict that had begun as dispute over planar territory transformed into competition for mortal souls, making every material plane world into a recruiting ground where devils and demons fought through, proxies and cults. The neutral planes recognized the existential threat posed by potential victory for either side. If devils conquered the abyss, their lawful evil would spread across the multiverse, with nothing to check its expansion. If demons overran the 9 hells, chaotic evil would consume plane after plane in an orgy of destruction. The leaders of neutral planes, including Mount Celestia, Mechanus, and the Outlands, formed the Concordant Opposition, a loose alliance dedicated to ensuring the Blood War continued indefinitely. They provided covert support to whichever side appeared weaker, supplied intelligence to prevent either side from achieving surprise advantage, and occasionally intervened directly when the balance seemed threatened. The Blood War had become too useful as a mechanism for containing both devils and demons in mutual destruction to allow either side victory. The conflict that Asmodeus initiated through calculated strategic thinking had transformed into something beyond any single being's control, a cosmic phenomenon that would define lower planar politics for all ages to come. The river Styx flowed red with blood that would never wash clean. Darkspine and dozens of other fortresses stood as permanent monuments to eternal struggle. The plains of Pezunia and Avernus became graveyards where millions had died and millions more would follow. The Blood War had achieved terrible permanence, and both the 9 hells and the abyss had been forever changed by its perpetual slaughter. Among the countless demon lords vying for supremacy in the abyss, one possessed capabilities that set him apart from all rivals. Demogorgon's twin heads granted him advantages that transcended mere physical power, allowing him to consolidate control over territories that other demon lords could only dream of claiming. His rise to preeminence would reshape the political landscape of the entire plane. The layer that would become known as the Gaping Maw had existed for eons as contested territory, a realm of savage oceans and prehistoric jungles where dozens of minor demon lords fought endless skirmishes without any achieving lasting dominance. Demogorgon identified this layer as ideal for his purposes precisely because its fragmented political situation meant no single powerful demon lord controlled it. He arrived with an army of 50,000 personally loyal demons and immediately began systematic conquest of the layer's key strategic positions. The existing demon lords underestimated him at first, assuming he represented just another ambitious prince who would eventually fall to coordinated opposition. They failed to recognize how his dual consciousness gave him immunity to the political manipulation and psychic warfare that normally determined outcomes in abyssal power struggles. The conquest of the Gaping Maw took 17 years of sustained military operations. Demogorgon fought not as demons typically fought, with overwhelming force, applied chaotically, but with calculated precision that seemed almost undemonic in its methodical progression. He targeted enemy supply bases before attacking their armies, cutting off reinforcements and forcing opponents to fight at disadvantage. He negotiated temporary alliances with weaker demon lords, using them against stronger opponents before betraying and absorbing them once the primary threats had been eliminated. His twin heads allowed him to conduct negotiations with one voice while planning treachery with the other, making him uniquely capable of exploiting demon politics while remaining unexploited himself. By the time the last rival demon lord fell before him, Demogorgon controlled not just territory, but the layer's entire political and military infrastructure. The fortification of the Gaping Maw proceeded with unprecedented scale and ambition. Demogorgon understood that holding territory in the abyss required more than victory in battle. It required making the cost of challenging his rule so high that rivals would seek easier targets. He constructed his palace Abysm at the layer's geographic center, building it in a location where the layer's natural magic concentrated most powerfully. The palace itself defied conventional architecture, its towers spiraling in directions that hurt mortal minds to contemplate, while its foundations reached down through the layer's substance into the abyss's deepest substrata. Surrounding Abysm, Demogorgon established defensive perimeters that extended for hundreds of miles in all directions. He created killing zones where the layer's natural hazards had been weaponized and intensified. Jungles became impassable tangles of carnivorous plants bred specifically to devour demons. Oceans filled with predators that hunted in coordinated packs under Demogorgon's psychic control. His twin heads granted him immunity to mental assault that would have destroyed any single-minded demon lord. Other demon lords relied heavily on psychic domination to subjugate rivals, using mental powers to break enemy will before physical combat even began. Demogorgon's dual consciousness meant that attacking one head left the other free to counterattack, while attempting to assault both simultaneously required dividing mental resources in ways that made neither attack effective. He could function perfectly well with one head incapacitated, the other maintaining full control over his body and powers. This immunity transformed the political calculus of the Abyss because it meant Demogorgon could not be controlled, corrupted, or dominated through the methods that usually allowed weaker demon lords to punch above their weight class. He could only be defeated through direct physical confrontation, and few demon lords possessed the raw power necessary to defeat him in open combat. Demogorgon systematically subjugated demon lords who had relied on psychic domination as their primary power base. One by one, he challenged them to contests of mental strength that they could not decline without appearing weak before their followers. These contests ended identically. The opposing demon lord would unleash their most devastating psychic assault, confident in powers that had subjugated thousands of demons. Demogorgon would simply withstand the attack through his dual consciousness, then respond with his own mental assault that overwhelmed the exhausted opponent. 13 demon lords fell to this pattern before others recognized the futility of challenging Demogorgon on psychic grounds. Those who submitted voluntarily received positions of honor within his growing hierarchy. Those who resisted died, their essence absorbed to strengthen Demogorgon's already formidable power. The Savage Tide ritual represented Demogorgon's most ambitious magical achievement, a working designed to corrupt entire regions of the material plane into extensions of the Abyss itself. The ritual required years of development, drawing on magical theories that Demogorgon had extracted from captured mortal wizards and fallen celestials. The basic principle involved saturating a target region with concentrated abyssal essence until the local planar boundaries weakened enough to allow direct corruption. Once corrupted, the region would transform into a hybrid zone, existing partially in the material plane and partially in the abyss. Plants would mutate into twisted abyssal versions. Animals would transform into savage predators. Mortals caught in the affected area would either die or undergo changes that made them serve Demogorgon's interests whether they wished to or not. The first successful Savage Tide ritual targeted a coastal region on a material plane world where Demogorgon's cult had achieved significant penetration. The cultists performed the preliminary rituals that weakened planar boundaries, while Demogorgon personally channeled the necessary abyssal essence across dimensional barriers. The transformation began at the ritual site and spread outward in a wave of corruption that advanced several miles per day. Forests became jungle nightmares where every plant dripped with venom. The ocean turned foul and choked with demonic predators. Human settlements within the affected zone collapsed as residents succumbed to madness or mutation. Within 6 months, 3,000 square miles of formerly habitable land had become a festering abyssal wasteland. Demogorgon's followers perfected the ritual over subsequent decades, deploying it on 17 different material plane worlds and creating permanent corruption zones that served as bridgeheads for future demon incursions. Power recognized power. The demon lord Ahmon-Ibor ruled 13 layers through a combination of savage, cunning, and absolutely ruthless enforcement of his authority. He had watched Demogorgon's rise with growing concern, recognizing that the Prince of Demons represented potential threat to his own position. Ahmon-Ibor decided that eliminating Demogorgon before he grew too powerful represented sound strategic thinking. He challenged Demogorgon to single combat with the loser's territories forfeit to the winner, expecting his superior experience and his mastery of several unique combat techniques to grant him decisive advantage. The challenge could not be refused without losing face before the entire abyss. Demogorgon accepted. The duel took place on neutral ground, a barren layer claimed by neither combatant. Thousands of demons gathered to witness the confrontation, understanding that its outcome would shift the balance of abyssal power significantly, regardless of which lord prevailed. Ahmon-Ibor struck first, unleashing a barrage of attacks that would have obliterated any normal demon lord within seconds. Demogorgon weathered the assault, his twin heads coordinating defensive strategies while analyzing Ahmon-Ibor's fighting style for exploitable patterns. The battle raged across the barren landscape for 3 days without pause, both combatants pushing themselves to their absolute limits. Ahmon-Ibor possessed greater raw destructive power. Demogorgon possessed superior tactical awareness through his dual consciousness. The deciding moment came when Ahmon-Ibor committed fully to a devastating final assault, pouring all his remaining strength into an attack meant to shatter Demogorgon completely. One of Demogorgon's heads coordinated defense against this attack, while the other identified the momentary vulnerability it created. His counterstrike caught Ahmon-Ibor overextended and exhausted, tearing through weakened defenses and destroying his physical form utterly. Demogorgon claimed Ahmon-Ibor's 13 layers immediately, dispatching his own commanders to take possession before rival demon lords could contest the territories. The acquisition expanded his domain from 1 layer to 14 in a single stroke, making him arguably the most territorially powerful demon lord in the abyss. More importantly, the manner of his victory sent an unmistakable message to every other demon lord. Challenging Demogorgon meant risking not merely defeat, but total destruction and forfeiture of all holdings. The risk-reward calculation no longer favored direct confrontation. Demon lords who might have contested his rise instead sought accommodation, offering tribute and allegiance in exchange for being left unmolested within their own domains. The creation of the retriever species demonstrated Demogorgon's capacity for long-term planning, unusual among demons. He needed specialized servants capable of hunting down specific targets across planar boundaries, creatures with the intelligence to track prey through multiple dimensions, combined with the combat capability to overcome significant opposition. Working with corrupted artificers he had captured from various planes, Demogorgon designed and bred the first retrievers. These construct demon hybrids stood 8 feet tall on 4 spider-like legs, their bodies covered in enchanted metal plates that resisted both physical and magical damage. Each retriever possessed multiple sensory organs that could track targets through magical concealment, follow dimensional teleportation, and locate hidden planar refuges. Most terrifyingly, retrievers never stopped pursuing assigned targets until either the target was captured or the retriever was destroyed. Demogorgon deployed retrievers throughout the multiverse as his personal hunters, sending them after enemies who fled his wrath, targets he wanted captured for interrogation, or specific individuals whose deaths would serve his strategic interests. The retrievers proved devastatingly effective, successfully completing missions that would have required significant military forces if approached through conventional means. Their reputation spread rapidly across multiple planes as stories circulated of unstoppable hunters that tracked victims for years without rest. The psychological impact exceeded the retriever's direct tactical value, as Demogorgon's enemies understood that fleeing his domain no longer guaranteed safety. The Prince of Demons could reach across planar boundaries to punish transgressions or claim what he desired, expanding his effective sphere of influence far beyond his physically controlled territories. His cult spread to 17 material plane worlds simultaneously through coordinated missionary efforts that combined supernatural compulsion with genuine philosophical appeal. Demogorgon's worship offered power without the restrictive hierarchies that characterized devil cults or the self-destructive chaos that typified most demon worship. His dual nature allowed him to present different aspects to different followers. To some, he appeared as lord of savage beasts, offering primal strength to those who embraced their animal nature. To others, he manifested as master of forbidden knowledge, promising arcane secrets to those willing to pay his price. His priests gained actual power through their devotion, receiving spells and abilities that demonstrated their patron's reality to skeptical audiences. The cults grew exponentially, each converted mortal potentially converting others until Demogorgon commanded mortal power bases that rivaled those of minor gods. This mortal power base translated directly into increased abyssal influence through the mechanism of soul recruitment. Every mortal who worshipped Demogorgon and died in chaotic evil served him in death as they had in life, their souls arriving in the gaping maw and transforming into demons loyal specifically to the prince. While other demon lords relied on general corruption to eventually produce demons for their armies, Demogorgon enjoyed direct recruitment from dedicated mortal populations. The strategic advantage proved enormous, granting him reliable army reinforcements that flowed steadily from multiple material plane sources. His military capability expanded annually as his cult spread, creating a positive feedback loop where greater power enabled more cult activity, which produced more power. The attempted alliance between Orcus and Grazes against Demogorgon's rising power collapsed almost before it began, demonstrating the fundamental impossibility of sustained demon lord cooperation. Orcus approached Grazed with a straightforward proposal. Demogorgon threatened both of them. If they coordinated against him, dividing his territories after his inevitable defeat, both would benefit from removing the most powerful rival while increasing their own holdings. Grazed agreed with apparent enthusiasm, contributing forces to the joint military operations against Demogorgon's peripheral holdings. The initial attacks achieved moderate success, capturing outlying territories that Demogorgon had not heavily fortified. The alliance shattered within 3 weeks, when Grazes betrayed Orcus at a critical moment, withdrawing his forces just as a major assault on one of Demogorgon's key fortresses reached its decisive phase. Orcus's army found itself overextended and unsupported, facing counterattack from fresh Demogorgon reinforcements without the Grazed units that were supposed to protect their flanks. The battle turned into rout, Orcus barely escaping with a fraction of his initial force. Grazed later claimed he had received intelligence suggesting Orcus planned to betray him first, making the preemptive betrayal necessary self-defense. Orcus insisted Grazed had been working with Demogorgon all along, selling out the alliance in exchange for some private agreement. The truth remained unknowable and ultimately irrelevant. The alliance had failed, Demogorgon had survived, and both Orcus and Grazed had suffered losses that strengthened their rival's position. Demogorgon's forces repelled 3 major infernal invasions through a combination of strategic depth and tactical flexibility that devils had not anticipated facing from demons. The first invasion struck at the gaping maw directly, a 50,000-strong devil army attempting to establish a forward base in Demogorgon's primary layer. His defensive perimeters channeled the invasion force into prepared killing zones, where overwhelming demon numbers destroyed isolated devil units before they could coordinate mutual support. The second invasion targeted his holdings more subtly, attempting to corrupt demon commanders through infernal agents and create internal dissension. Demogorgon's dual consciousness allowed him to detect the corrupted demons through behavioral inconsistencies that single-minded demon lords might have missed. He purged the infiltrators personally and reorganized his command structure to prevent future penetration. The third invasion represented desperation, a massive assault that committed over 100,000 devils to destroying Demogorgon's power base. He met this threat by personally leading his armies, his presence on the battlefield inspiring demons to suicidal bravery, while his tactical direction neutralized the devil's usual organizational advantages. By the end of his consolidation period, Demogorgon controlled or significantly influenced approximately 1/3 of all mapped abyssal layers. Some he ruled directly through appointed governors and military occupation. Others he dominated through vassal demon lords who paid tribute and followed his strategic direction while maintaining nominal independence. Still, others fell within his sphere of influence through cult activity and agent networks rather than military control. The sheer scale of his domain exceeded anything the Abyss had witnessed since the age of oberith unity. He had achieved what most considered impossible in the chaotic environment of the Abyss, creating an actual empire with functioning administration and coordinated policy. Other demon lords either accommodated his power or plotted futile schemes against him while lacking the capability to challenge him directly. The Prince of Demons had risen to preeminence, not through age or primordial power, but through superior capability leveraged systematically over centuries of patient effort. His twin heads had proven decisive in every arena that mattered, granting advantages in combat, politics, and strategic planning that no rival could match. The Gaping Maw stood as the most powerful single layer in the Abyss. Abysm represented an impregnable fortress, and Demogorgon's name inspired fear across multiple planes simultaneously. He had transformed himself from mere demon lord into something approaching a force of nature, an entity whose influence shaped the Abyss as significantly as the Shard of Evil itself had shaped it in ancient times. Death itself could be conquered, transformed into a weapon more terrible than anything chaos alone could produce. Orcus understood this fundamental truth when others saw mortality as mere inconvenience, and his vision would revolutionize the nature of demonic warfare. The Lord of Undeath would build an empire from corpses that refused to stay dead. Orcus discovered the secret of animating demons as undead through experiments that horrified even other demon lords who considered themselves beyond shock. Traditional necromancy failed when applied to demonic essence because demons already existed in a state between life and death, their forms regenerating after destruction through the Abyss's fundamental properties. Orcus recognized that this regeneration represented the key obstacle. If he could interrupt the regenerative process and bind destroyed demon essence into corpse form before it reformed, he could create undead that retained demonic power while gaining undead immunities. The process required capturing demons at the exact moment of destruction, freezing their essence in death state through necromantic bindings of unprecedented complexity. His early experiments produced horrific failures, abominations that collapsed into puddles of necrotic slime or exploded in bursts of uncontrolled negative energy. Success came only after decades of refinement. But when he finally perfected the technique, he had achieved something genuinely new in the multiverse. The first undead fiends violated fundamental abyssal nature in ways that created ripples throughout the plane's substance. The Abyss existed as realm of corrupt life, of fecund evil that spawned endless variations of demonic existence. Undeath represented the opposite principle, the cessation and perversion of life into something that should not continue existing. When Orcus animated his first demon corpse, the Abyss itself recoiled from the creation. The local layer's substance withered around the undead demon. Plants died, water became stagnant. The very air grew cold and still. Orcus understood immediately that he had created weapons that damaged the Abyss itself, entities so contrary to the plane's nature that their mere presence corrupted its fundamental essence. He began producing undead demons systematically, building armies that other demon lords feared to face because defeating them required completely destroying their physical forms rather than simply banishing them back to the Abyss for eventual regeneration. His layer of Thanatos transformed under his rule into a realm of permanent death where even demons feared to tread. Orcus reshaped the entire layer according to necromantic principles, replacing its original chaotic vitality with deathly stillness. The sky turned perpetually gray, neither day nor night, but eternal twilight that leached color from everything beneath it. Rivers ran black with necrotic poison that killed anything living that touched it. Forests became graveyards where trees grew from corpses instead of soil. Mountains hollowed themselves into vast ossuaries containing the bones of billions. At the layer's center, Orcus constructed Everlost, his palace of bone and petrified screams, a structure so saturated with death magic that mortal visitors would die within minutes of crossing its threshold, simply from proximity to concentrated negative energy. Thanatos became the first abyssal layer where demons could experience true mortality. Orcus had learned to prevent demon regeneration within his domain, creating zones where destroyed demons simply ceased to exist rather than reforming after banishment. This capability terrified every demon who learned of it because it meant Orcus could permanently kill rivals rather than merely defeating them temporarily. Demon lords who had operated for eons with the assumption that death represented temporary setback suddenly faced the possibility of permanent extinction. Some avoided Thanatos entirely, refusing to enter a realm where their immortality no longer functioned. Others sought alliance with Orcus specifically to avoid becoming his enemies. A few challenged him directly, seeking to prove his power was exaggerated. Their permanent absence from abyssal politics testified to the reality of his capabilities. The wand of Orcus was forged from materials that should not exist, drawn from sources that remain disputed across multiple scholarly traditions. Most accounts agree that Orcus somehow obtained the essence of a dead god, a deity who had been slain during one of the countless conflicts that occasionally claimed divine lives. Some versions claim he bargained with mysterious entities from beyond the known planes, trading unknown favors for divine remains. Others insist he personally slew a minor god through an elaborate trap that took centuries to arrange. Regardless of how he obtained the raw material, Orcus spent decades forging it into a weapon of unprecedented power. The wand measured 6 feet in length, carved from a single piece of fossilized divine bone and topped with a human skull that retained fragments of consciousness from the dead god. The artifact radiated death magic so intense that, merely standing near, it drained life force from living beings. The wand granted Orcus power to challenge any demon lord directly, regardless of their accumulated strength. Its magic could slay with a touch, animate the dead with a gesture, and drain souls from living victims to fuel his necromantic workings. Most significantly, the wand allowed him to bypass normal limitations on demon destruction, killing demons permanently even outside Thanatos through the application of divine death magic. He tested its capabilities against a demon lord named Abraxas, who had unwisely insulted him during a gathering of powerful demons. Orcus appeared in Abraxas's stronghold without warning, struck him once with the wand, and watched as the demon lord crumbled to dust that would never reform. The demonstration sent shockwaves through abyssal politics. Orcus had become the demon lord most capable of permanently ending rivals, making him simultaneously the most feared and most courted power in the Livers' abyss. He launched the Thanatos Crusade with armies that could not truly die, conquering 12 layers in rapid succession through military operations that defied conventional demonic warfare. His undead legions marched without need for supply lines or rest, continuing battles indefinitely while living opponents exhausted themselves. Destroyed undead were reanimated on the battlefield, turning enemy victories into Pyrrhic disasters as their own fallen became Orcus's reinforcements. He personally led the conquests, the wand of Orcus shattering defensive fortifications and slaying enemy commanders with casual ease. Layer after layer fell before him, their previous rulers either submitting to his authority or dying permanently when they refused. The crusade appeared unstoppable until it met organized resistance from an unexpected source. Death found its match in hunger. Yeenoghu rose to prominence specifically by resisting Orcus's expansion, establishing himself as the demon lord of savage consumption and predatory violence. Where Orcus represented calculated necromancy and structured undeath, Yeenoghu embodied pure bestial savagery and insatiable appetite. He claimed the layer known as the Death Dells, a realm of perpetual hunting grounds where packs of demons stalked prey through blood-soaked forests. Yinohu recognized that Orcus's undead armies possessed a critical vulnerability. They could not feed. Living demons could consume fallen enemies to restore their strength mid-battle. Undead demons required necromantic energy from their master to continue functioning. Yinohu developed tactics specifically designed to exploit this limitation, using mobile strike forces that avoided direct confrontation while targeting the necromantic conduits that powered Orcus's undead legions. The conflict between Orcus and Yinohu escalated into full war when their expanding territories came into direct contact. Orcus commanded overwhelming numerical advantage through his proselyte, undead armies. Yinohu fielded smaller forces that compensated through superior mobility and savage ferocity. Battles between them devolved into grinding attrition campaigns where Orcus's forces slowly advanced, while Yinohu's demons struck from ambush, inflicted casualties, and withdrew before being trapped. Neither demon lord could achieve decisive victory. Orcus lacked the mobility to pin down Yinohu's forces for destruction. Yinohu lacked the raw power to break Orcus's fortified positions. The war dragged on for decades before both sides accepted stalemate and withdrew to consolidate their respective domains. The Death Dells remained independent, a permanent obstacle to Orcus's expansion that he could not eliminate despite multiple attempts. Orcus attempted to achieve godhood through mortal worship, recognizing that divine power would elevate him beyond mere demon lord status and grant him capabilities that could break the strategic stalemate with rivals. He established cults on 23 material plane worlds simultaneously, spreading worship of himself as god of death and undeath. His priests gained genuine power through devotion, receiving spells that raised the dead, drained life from enemies, and communicated with their patron. The cults grew rapidly in regions where death figured prominently in local culture, appealing to those who feared mortality and sought power over it. Orcus funneled resources into his mortal worship, constructing temples, empowering high priests, and performing miracles that demonstrated his divine claims. For a time, it appeared his apotheosis might succeed. The transformation into Tenebrous occurred when rival demon lords finally recognized the threat Orcus's potential godhood represented. Demogorgon, Grazist, and several other powerful demon lords coordinated a rare alliance specifically to prevent Orcus from achieving divine status. They understood that a god-level Orcus would dominate the abyss completely, reducing them all to vassals or corpses. The alliance struck at Orcus with overwhelming force, attacking him simultaneously from multiple directions while he was distracted by a major ritual meant to cement his divine transformation. The wand of Orcus granted him tremendous power, but even artifacts have limits. He fell before the combined might of his enemies, his physical form destroyed, and his essence scattered across multiple planes. Death did not end him. Orcus existed for decades as Tenebrous, a vestige of his former self that retained consciousness but lacked physical form. He drifted through the planes as living shadow, unable to interact with physical reality except through indirect manifestation. The wand of Orcus disappeared during his death, spirited away by unknown parties to unknown locations. His cults collapsed without his active guidance, their priests losing access to spells as their patron's power faded. His empire of undead slowly crumbled as necromantic bindings, weakened without his presence to maintain them. Thanatos fell into chaos as lesser demons fought over control of the layer. For a time, it appeared Orcus had been permanently removed from abyssal politics. His resurrection proved that even true death could be overcome through sufficient will and preparation. Orcus had implemented contingency plans during his reign specifically against the possibility of his destruction, hiding portions of his essence in secure locations across multiple planes and arranging for loyal cultists to perform resurrection rituals under specific circumstances. These preparations eventually succeeded in reconstituting his consciousness and providing him with new physical form. The resurrected Orcus emerged changed by his experience of death, his necromantic powers enhanced by having experienced oblivion from the inside. He reclaimed Thanatos with unexpected ease, finding that many demons welcomed his return as preferable to the chaos that had reigned in his absence. The resurrected Orcus returned with enhanced necromantic power that reflected his unique experience of existing as disembodied vestige for decades. He could now drain life force more efficiently, animate more corpses simultaneously, and extend his death magic across greater distances. Most significantly, he had learned new techniques for preventing resurrection and regeneration, making his kill methods even more permanent than before. However, his temporary death had cost him significant political influence. Rival demon lords had divided much of his former territory during his absence. His cult network had to be rebuilt from scattered remnants. The wand of Orcus remained missing, reducing his combat capability substantially. He retained his position as one of the most powerful demon lords, but the absolute dominance he had achieved before his death remained frustratingly beyond reach. His eternal rivalry with Demogorgon erupted into direct war 3 separate times over the centuries following his resurrection, each conflict ending in destructive stalemate that benefited neither participant. The first war began when Orcus attempted to reclaim territories that Demogorgon had seized during his absence as Tenebrous. Both demon lords committed massive armies to the conflict, their forces clashing across 17 different layers simultaneously. The war lasted 12 years and killed millions of demons on both sides before exhaustion and Yugoloth manipulation engineered a ceasefire. The second war started over a dispute regarding cult activity on a material plane world both demon lords claimed as their recruiting ground. This conflict remained more limited in scope but proved equally inconclusive. The third war erupted almost spontaneously when agents of both demon lords encountered each other during unrelated operations and escalated local skirmish into full-scale military confrontation. None of these wars achieved decisive victory for either side because Orcus and Demogorgon possessed fundamentally incompatible but roughly equal capabilities. Demogorgon commanded superior numbers and tactical coordination. Orcus fielded undead armies that refused to stay destroyed and necromantic powers that could slay demons permanently. When Demogorgon's forces achieved tactical victories, Orcus reanimated the fallen and continued fighting. When Orcus struck at Demogorgon's commanders, the Prince of Demons simply promoted replacements and adjusted strategy. Neither could gain permanent advantage. Neither could accept permanent subordination to the other. Their rivalry became a defining feature of abyssal politics, other demon lords carefully positioning themselves to avoid being crushed between these two titans when their conflicts inevitably erupted. Orcus perfected the art of soul theft through techniques that expanded beyond simple murder into systematic harvesting operations. He developed methods to extract souls from living victims without killing them, leaving the physical body alive but empty of animating spirit. These soulless husks could then be programmed as perfect infiltrators, appearing alive and normal while serving Orcus's interests absolutely. He also refined processes for converting stolen souls into various forms of currency and raw material. Souls could be burned to fuel necromantic rituals, traded to other demon lords for resources or favors, or transformed into larvae through accelerated corruption. The first lava farms transformed soul trafficking from individual opportunism into industrial-scale operation. Orcus constructed massive facilities on Thanatos where stolen souls underwent systematic corruption that broke down their individual identities and reformed them as lava, the base currency of lower planar economies. These worm-like creatures retained enough consciousness to suffer but lacked sufficient will to resist their fate. Thousands of larvae could be produced from a single successful soul harvesting operation. Other demon lords purchased larvae in bulk to use as food for their troops, raw materials for their magical workings, or building blocks for creating new demons. Orcus became one of the wealthiest demon lords through his larva trade, his economic power rivaling his military might and granting him influence over demons who would never willingly serve him directly. The soul economy he created fundamentally changed how demon lords competed for power. Previously, Political success in the Abyss had depended primarily on military strength and personal capabilities. Orcus demonstrated that economic dominance provided alternative path to influence. Demon lords who controlled lava supplies could reward allies, punish enemies through embargo, and purchase loyalty from mercenary forces. The shift created new instability as demon lords who had never excelled at combat found they could accumulate power through control of soul harvesting operations and lava production. Orcus himself benefited enormously, his position secured not just by his personal power and undead armies, but by the fact that dozens of demon lords depended on his lava farms for their own operations. The Lord of Undeath had transformed himself from powerful demon lord into fundamental pillar of abyssal civilization, his influence extending into military affairs, religious cult activity, and economic systems that touched every corner of the plane. His rivalry with Demogorgon remained unresolved, but resolution no longer seemed necessary. Both demon lords had achieved positions secure enough that they could afford eternal conflict without existential risk. Thanatos stood as monument to the principle that death itself could be conquered and weaponized. The Abyss had gained its preeminent necromancer, and all the planes would feel the consequences. Intelligence and charm proved as effective as raw power in the chaotic politics of the Abyss, though few demon lords possessed either quality in sufficient measure. Graz'zt was the exception, a being whose calculated sophistication set him apart from the savage hordes that dominated most abyssal layers. His acquisition of territory would demonstrate that demons could achieve through seduction what others required armies to claim. Graz'zt claimed the triple-layered realm of Azagrat through methods that shocked demon lords accustomed to straightforward conquest. The three connected layers had belonged to a demon lord named Verin who ruled through brute strength and terror, maintaining control through constant displays of overwhelming violence. Graz'zt studied Verin's court for decades before making his move, identifying key supporters whose loyalty depended on fear rather than genuine devotion. He approached these demons individually with offers they found impossible to refuse: power, protection, advancement within a new hierarchy that would reward competence rather than mere survival. He seduced Verin's chief, consort, gaining intimate knowledge of the demon lord's habits and vulnerabilities. He bribed Verin's generals with promises of expanded territories under his rule. By the time Graz'zt challenged Verin directly, the demon lord's entire power structure had already shifted allegiance. The actual confrontation lasted minutes, ending when Verin discovered his bodyguards had been bought and his magical defenses had been sabotaged. Graz'zt claimed Azagrat without fighting a single major battle. His unusual intellect and charm marked him as distinctly different from other demon lords, sparking persistent rumors regarding his true origin. Most demons possessed cunning but not true intelligence, capable of tactical thinking but not strategic planning that extended beyond immediate advantage. Graz'zt demonstrated genuine intellectual sophistication. He read extensively, collecting libraries of knowledge from multiple planes. He engaged in philosophical debates with summoned mortals, testing ideas against opposing viewpoints rather than simply asserting demon supremacy. He appreciated art and music, maintaining collections that would rival those of material plane nobles. His physical appearance enhanced these unusual qualities. Where most demon lords manifested as monstrous horrors, Graz'zt appeared almost humanoid. Tall and muscular with ebony skin and aristocratic features, he could pass for a dark elf or human, if not for his 6 fingers on each hand and the aura of wrongness that accompanied his presence. The theories regarding his origin divided into several major camps, each with supporting evidence that remained frustratingly incomplete. The Devil Defector theory pointed to his unusual discipline, his preference for contracts and binding agreements, and his 6-fingered hands that resembled certain infernal bloodlines. Proponents noted that a powerful devil who defected to the Abyss would explain both his capabilities and his methods. The natural Tanari theory argued that Graz'zt simply represented evolutionary peak of demon development, the product of countless generations refined into perfect predatory intelligence. His supporters insisted that assuming external origin diminished demon potential unjustly. The third theory, whispered but rarely stated openly, suggested connections to entities from planes beyond the standard cosmological model. Some claimed Grudzyst originated from the far realm, that impossible space beyond reality where normal laws ceased functioning. Others pointed to evidence of ancient pacts with beings even gods feared to name. Regardless of truth, Grudzyst declined to confirm or deny any theory, understanding that mystery enhanced his reputation and kept rivals uncertain about his capabilities. He occasionally made contradictory statements, claiming devil heritage in one conversation and pure demon origin in another, ensuring that no definitive answer could emerge. This calculated ambiguity served his interests perfectly. Enemies who did not understand his nature could not effectively counter his methods. Allies who believed different origin stories could find common cause in serving him despite holding incompatible worldviews. The Triple Throne rose at the heart of Azagrat as physical manifestation of Gruzyst's rule and philosophy. The throne itself consisted of 3 seats arranged in ascending tiers, representing the 3 layers he controlled. Constructed from materials plundered from a dozen different planes, it combined aesthetics from multiple cultures into a whole that transcended simple fusion. Elven silverwork intertwined with dwarven stone mastery, infernal metallurgy supported celestial gem cutting. The throne room surrounding it stretched the length of a cathedral, its walls covered in tapestries depicting Gruzyst's conquests in artistic styles ranging from realistic portraiture to abstract symbolism. From the Triple Throne, Gruzys conducted the business of ruling his realm, with attention to detail that other demon lords would find incomprehensible. He held regular audiences, hearing petitions from subjects and issuing judgments based on established precedent rather than momentary whim. His influence over abyssal politics operated through networks of obligation and mutual interest rather than crude military threat. Gruzys maintained extensive intelligence operations that gathered information about every significant demon lord's activities, resources, and vulnerabilities. He used this information not for immediate exploitation but for long-term positioning, knowing that information held in reserve gained value over time. When demon lords needed mediation in disputes, they often approached Gruzys because his reputation for honoring agreements made him acceptable to both parties. When complicated schemes required coordination between multiple factions, Gruzys could broker arrangements that would collapse into treachery under other leadership. He became indispensable not through raw power, but through demonstrated reliability in an environment where reliability represented the rarest commodity. The first Cambion dynasties emerged from Gruzyst's systematic seduction of mortal women across multiple material plane worlds. Unlike most demon lords who viewed mortals as resources to exploit or souls to corrupt, Gruzys recognized their potential as breeding stock for creating hybrid bloodlines that combined demonic power with mortal versatility. He appeared to mortal women as darkly attractive suitor, concealing his true nature while courting them with sophistication that few mortal men could match. Some he seduced through genuine charm. Others he trapped through magical compulsion or carefully constructed circumstances that left them no choice but acceptance. Regardless of method, the result remained consistent. Half-fiend children born from these unions inherited significant portions of their father's power while retaining enough mortality to operate in environments where pure demons could not easily function. Gruzys acknowledged and supported his Cambion offspring in ways that shocked other demon lords. He provided them with resources, training, and political backing that enabled them to establish themselves as significant powers in their own right. The most successful Cambions founded dynasties that ruled mortal kingdoms or established hidden power bases within existing civilizations. These dynasties served Gruzyst's interests while pursuing their own agendas, creating complex webs of loyalty and obligation that extended across multiple generations. Some Cambion lineages persisted for centuries, their members rising to positions of influence in mortal society while maintaining secret allegiance to their demonic progenitor. Through these bloodlines, Graz'zt gained influence in mortal affairs that exceeded what direct demon cults could achieve, creating networks of corruption that appeared entirely mortal on the surface. His alliance with the Dark Elves began when he answered the summoning of a desperate drow matriarch whose house faced extinction from rival families. The summoning ritual had been designed to contact any powerful demon willing to provide military assistance in exchange for souls and worship. Graz responded personally, recognizing opportunity in the Drow's sophisticated culture and their existing separation from surface world politics. He negotiated a contract that provided the matriarch with demon troops sufficient to destroy her rivals in exchange for establishing formal worship of Graz'zt within her house. The arrangement succeeded beyond either party's expectations. The matriarch's house achieved dominance in her city. Graz'zt gained a foothold in Drow society that he systematically expanded over subsequent centuries. The Drow proved ideal allies for Graz'tz's long-term schemes. Their culture already embraced treachery and ambition as virtues, making them philosophically compatible with demonic service, while retaining enough discipline to follow complex plans. Their position in the Underdark gave them access to resources and strategic locations that surface dwellers could not easily contest. Most importantly, they possessed genuine civilization rather than barbaric tribalism, making them capable of sophisticated operations that required patience and planning. Graz'zt cultivated relationships with multiple drow houses across different cities and worlds, carefully balancing their competing interests while ensuring all remained ultimately loyal to him. He never demanded exclusive worship, understanding that Drow served Lolth primarily, and that attempting to displace her would unite the Dark Elves against him. Instead, he positioned himself as valuable secondary patron, the Demon Lord Drow could turn to when Lolth's demands became intolerable or when they needed capabilities the Spider Queen did not provide. Civilization emerged in chaos. The rule of Azagrat became the most stable in the Abyss through Graz'zt's implementation of actual governance systems that persisted beyond his personal attention. He established a bureaucracy of capable demons who administered his territories according to consistent principles. Tax collection occurred on regular schedules. Justice was dispensed through courts that followed established law codes. Infrastructure received maintenance and improvement. Cities within Azagrat functioned with reliability that would seem impossible to those familiar only with typical abyssal chaos. Buildings stood for decades without collapsing into ruin. Trade routes remained open and relatively safe. Contracts were enforced with enough consistency that merchants could conduct business across layers with reasonable expectation of receiving what they paid for. This stability attracted demons seeking alternatives to the constant violence that characterized most abyssal existence. Graz'zt welcomed refugees from other layers, offering protection and opportunity in exchange for loyalty and productive contribution to Azagrat's economy. His realm's population swelled with demons who discovered they preferred structured environment to absolute chaos. These demons remained fundamentally evil, but their evil took forms compatible with functioning civilization: assassination through political maneuvering rather than random murder, exploitation through economic manipulation rather than crude slavery, corruption through legal technicalities rather than open theft. Azagrat demonstrated that demons could build something lasting when properly motivated and organized, challenging assumptions about the inherently self-destructive nature of chaotic evil. Functioning cities rose across Azagrat's 3 layers, each reflecting Graz'zt's vision of demonic civilization at its peak. The city of Zelatar served as his capital, a metropolis of dark towers and elegant plazas where demons conducted business according to complex social protocols. Markets sold goods from across the plains, their merchants operating under Graz'zt's commercial codes that prohibited violence within market boundaries. Libraries housed knowledge accumulated from thousands of worlds, available to any demon willing to pay the access fees. Theaters presented performances ranging from elaborate operas to gladiatorial combat, entertainment refined to appeal to demonic sensibilities while maintaining artistic merit. The city possessed infrastructure that most material plane capitals would envy. Aqueducts delivered water from clean sources. Sewers removed waste efficiently. Street lighting allowed safe navigation during dark hours. The contrast with typical abyssal settlements proved so stark that visitors from other layers often struggled to accept they remained in the abyss at all. Lasting treaties between demon factions became possible within Azagrat because Grazd enforced them with genuine commitment. When two demon lords agreed to cease hostilities within his territory, Grazd guaranteed the agreement through threat of his own intervention. When merchant consortiums formed partnerships to exploit specific opportunities, Grazd's courts provided contract enforcement that made such partnerships viable. The reliability transformed Azagrat into neutral ground, where demons who were enemies elsewhere could negotiate without immediate fear of betrayal. This neutrality served Grazd's interests by making his realm indispensable for abyssal diplomacy, ensuring that even demon lords who disliked him needed to maintain functional relationships with him. Grazd's attempted invasion of the prime material plane through the Greyhawk region represented his most ambitious military operation and his most significant failure. He spent decades preparing the invasion through careful infiltration of key mortal institutions, corrupting leaders, and establishing cult networks that would support demon forces. Once they arrived, the plan called for opening a massive portal that would allow entire demon armies to cross into the material plane simultaneously, overwhelming local defenses through sheer numbers before organized resistance could form. The initial stages proceeded flawlessly. The portal opened on schedule, and demon legions poured through into an unprepared countryside. Grazd personally led the invasion, his presence ensuring coordination that demon armies rarely achieved. The invasion nearly succeeded despite opposition from powerful mortal heroes who rallied defenders and led counterattacks against demon positions. Grazd's forces captured significant territory, establishing fortified positions that proved difficult to dislodge. His Cambion offspring coordinated with mortal cultists to sabotage enemy supply lines. For months, it appeared the invasion might achieve permanent foothold in the material plane. The turning point came when the mortal heroes discovered the portal's anchor points and began systematically destroying them. Grazd recognized too late that his invasion depended entirely on maintaining portal access for reinforcement and supply. Without the portals, his armies became isolated and unsupported. He ordered fighting retreat back to the abyss, preserving his forces rather than allowing them to be destroyed in detail. His 3-century imprisonment in the Forgotten Temple weakened his position catastrophically, allowing rivals to seize portions of Azagrat and demonstrating the limits of even his sophisticated governance. The imprisonment occurred through elaborate traps set by enemies who had coordinated specifically to remove him from abyssal politics. The details remained obscure, lost in contradictory accounts and deliberate misinformation. What mattered was the result. Grazd found himself trapped in extra-dimensional prison, unable to communicate with his followers or exercise influence over his domain. Without his active leadership, the stability he had built began eroding. Rival demon lords invaded Azagrat's outlying territories. His bureaucracy fragmented as different factions pursued incompatible agendas. His Cambion dynasties fought among themselves over succession rights. The cities he had built descended toward chaos as enforcement of his laws became inconsistent. The return of Grazd triggered a restructuring of abyssal power dynamics as he systematically reclaimed his lost territories through the same methods that had won them originally. He emerged from imprisonment weakened but not broken, his intellect and charm intact, even if his military forces had been depleted during his absence. Rather than immediately launching military campaigns to recover lost territory, he began rebuilding his intelligence network and re-establishing contact with key supporters. He negotiated with some rivals, offering them better terms for peaceful withdrawal than they could hope to achieve through continued occupation. He bribed others with resources and information. He orchestrated coups that replaced hostile demon lords with allies who owed their positions to his support. Territory returned to his control piece by piece, recovered through sophistication rather than simple force. His network of mortal cultists became the most sophisticated intelligence operation in the lower planes, surpassing even the extensive spy networks maintained by Asmodeus in the Nine Hells. Graz'zt understood that information represented power equal to military might, and he invested accordingly in gathering it. His cultists operated in every major mortal civilization, occupying positions ranging from merchant princes to royal advisors. They reported regularly on political developments, economic trends, technological innovations, and social movements. This information flowed to Graz'zt's analysts in Zelatar, where specialized demons synthesized it into actionable intelligence. He knew when mortal kingdoms planned to war against each other before their own generals received marching orders. He understood economic vulnerabilities that could be exploited for profit or destabilization. He identified individuals whose corruption would serve his interests and directed cultists to approach them with perfectly tailored temptations. The Dark Prince had proven that demons could achieve through intelligence what others required armies to accomplish. That seduction could triumph where simple violence failed, and that civilization could emerge even in the abyss when properly cultivated. His 3 layers stood as monument to these principles, demonstrating that chaos and evil need not preclude sophistication or lasting achievement. Azagrat endured as the most unusual realm in the entire abyss, and Graz'zt's influence extended far beyond its boundaries through networks of obligation, alliance, and carefully cultivated dependence that made him indispensable to abyssal politics, regardless of his position in direct power hierarchies. The gods themselves were not immune to corruption, and when divine beings fell, they fell with force enough to reshape entire planes. Lolth's descent from the heavens to the depths would prove catastrophic for multiple civilizations and create one of the abyss's most unusual layers. Her transformation from goddess to demon queen would redefine what either category meant. Lolth was cast down from the Seldarine pantheon by Corellon Larethian in an act of divine judgment that split the elven race forever. The exact nature of her crime remained disputed across different elven traditions, with some claiming she attempted to murder Corellon and seize his position, while others insisted she sought to overthrow the entire Seldarine pantheon and remake the elven race according to her own vision. Regardless of specific transgression, the punishment proved absolute. Corellon struck her with power sufficient to sever her connection to Arvandor, the elven heaven, and sent her plummeting through the plains. She fell for what seemed like eternity, passing through multiple layers of reality as her divine form burned with the friction of uncontrolled descent. Lesser beings would have been annihilated by such fall. Lolth survived through sheer force of will and the fundamental indestructibility of divine essence, though survival came at tremendous cost. The impact created the 66th layer of the abyss in an event that registered across multiple planes simultaneously. Lolth struck the abyss with force comparable to meteor impact, punching through the planar substrate and creating a dimensional crater that immediately began filling with her corrupted divine essence. The resulting explosion vaporized everything within 1,000 miles of the impact site, creating a void that the abyss's natural properties rushed to fill. Instead of forming a normal abyssal layer through gradual accumulation of corruption, the 66th layer spawned instantly from the collision between divine essence and abyssal substance. The combination produced something genuinely unique, a realm that existed partially within standard abyssal geography while simultaneously occupying dimensional space outside normal planar structure. The demon web pits emerged from this collision as a realm that bent to Lolth's will, unlike any natural abyssal layer. Where other layers possessed their own character that even demon lords could only partially control, the demon web responded to Lolth's thoughts as extension of her own being. She shaped it into an infinite maze of webbing that stretched across impossible dimensions, its strands connecting to each other through geometric patterns that violated every principle of spatial coherence. The webs ranged in scale from gossamer threads thin as thought to cables thick as mountains, all of them sticky with venom that dissolved anything unauthorized that touched them. Gravity functioned according to Lolth's whim, allowing her to walk on any surface, regardless of orientation, while intruders found themselves constantly falling toward whatever direction currently served her purposes. The layer existed as hybrid space between multiple states of reality, neither fully within the abyss nor completely separate from it. Travelers entering the demon web pits often discovered they could see multiple layers of reality simultaneously, the webbing existing in normal space while also extending through dimensions mortals lacked the sensory organs to properly perceive. This multi-dimensional nature made the demon web effectively impossible to map because its geography changed based on which dimensional perspective the viewer occupied. A path that led to specific destination from one angle might lead somewhere completely different when approached from another direction. Only Lolth herself understood the true structure, and she jealously guarded this knowledge as ultimate security against invasion. She transformed from fallen goddess to demon queen through process that retained divine power while embracing chaotic evil completely. Most beings who fell from grace either died or lost their former capabilities entirely, becoming shadows of their previous selves. Lolth refused both fates. She recognized that the abyss offered power to match what she had lost in Arvandor, but accessing that power required accepting fundamental transformation. She embraced her new nature willingly, allowing abyssal corruption to fuse with her divine essence rather than resisting the change. The fusion created something unprecedented, a being who retained godhood while simultaneously achieving demon lord status. She could grant spells to worshippers like a deity while commanding demons like any abyssal prince. She maintained divine portfolio over spiders, darkness, and treachery while expanding her influence into realms of chaos and destruction that her former divine status would never have permitted. The Dark Elves followed her into exile with devotion that transcended reason, their entire civilization choosing damnation over abandoning their goddess. When Lolth fell, she called to those elves who had supported her attempted coup against the Seldarine. Thousands answered, understanding that their choice meant exile from surface lands and eternal separation from other elven kindred. These dark elves underwent their own transformation, their skin darkening to obsidian black, and their eyes adapting to absolute darkness as Lolth reshaped them according to her new vision. She guided them to the Underdark, that vast network of caverns and tunnels that existed beneath the surface of most material plane worlds. There, protected from sunlight that would now burn their transformed flesh, they established new cities according to principles Lolth dictated directly. The relocation of entire Dark Elf civilization to the Underdark across multiple material plane worlds represented migration on a scale that few mortal races had ever attempted. Lolth did not guide her followers to a single world, but rather to Underdark regions on dozens of different planes simultaneously, spreading Drow civilization across the multiverse rather than concentrating it in any single location. This dispersion served multiple purposes. It ensured that no single catastrophe could destroy the Drow entirely. It created competing Drow cities that would keep each other in check through rivalry and occasional warfare. Most importantly, it meant Lolth's influence extended across numerous material plane worlds, granting her access to mortal souls on a scale that few demon lords could match. Each Drow city became a temple city where Lolth's worship dominated every aspect of life, from birth to death and beyond. Lolth established a theocracy where her priestesses held absolute power, inverting the male-dominated structures that had characterized elven society under the Seldarine. Drow males found themselves relegated to subordinate positions, valued primarily for their utility as warriors, wizards, or breeding stock. Female Drow who showed aptitude for divine magic were identified young and trained as priestesses of Lolth, learning not just spells but the intricate political maneuvering necessary to survive in a society where murder represented acceptable tool for advancement. The most successful priestesses rose to become matron mothers, absolute rulers of their houses who answered only to Lolth herself. These matron mothers competed viciously for their goddess's favor, conducting wars and intrigues that kept Drow society in constant turmoil while ensuring that only the most capable leaders survived to prominence. The Spider Queen's demand for perpetual conflict among her followers served purposes beyond simple entertainment. Lolth understood that static civilizations grew complacent and weak. By requiring her priestesses to constantly compete for power and prove their worth through successful treachery and warfare, she ensured that Drow society remained dynamic and dangerous. Weak houses were destroyed and their resources absorbed by stronger ones. Incompetent matron mothers were assassinated and replaced by more capable priestesses. The society operated as vast crucible where only the most cunning, ruthless, and capable Drow survived to pass their traits to the next generation. The system produced individuals of terrifying competence, Drow who combined magical power, political sophistication, and absolute moral flexibility in ways that made them formidable agents of Lolth's will on any plane they operated. Her lair existed partially outside normal abyssal space, connected to every Drow city through portal threads she personally controlled. The demon web pits possessed countless access points, each one corresponding to a specific location in the material multiverse. Most of these portals opened in Drow cities, hidden within temples where only Lolth's highest priestesses knew their locations. Through these portals, Lolth could observe events in every Drow settlement simultaneously, maintaining awareness of her followers' activities across dozens of worlds. The portals also allowed her to manifest avatars in the material plane whenever situations required her direct intervention, projecting portions of her consciousness and power through the web strands into physical reality. No other demon lord possessed such extensive and reliable access to mortal worlds, giving Lolth advantages in cult recruitment and material influence that her fellow abyssal princes envied but could not duplicate. The portals made the demon web pits into cosmic hub where all Drow civilization connected regardless of which material plane world they inhabited. Priestesses could travel between worlds by entering the demon web and following specific web strands to their desired destination. This capability allowed Drow cities on different planes to maintain contact, trade goods and information, and coordinate military operations that spanned the multiverse. It also meant Lolth could relocate resources and personnel rapidly in response to threats or opportunities, concentrating force where needed while leaving minimal garrison elsewhere. The strategic flexibility this provided made Drow civilization far more resilient than its dispersed nature might suggest. The attempted coup by her son Vairon failed catastrophically when she devoured his divine essence, demonstrating that even other gods underestimated her hybrid nature. Vairon had grown resentful of his mother's treatment of male Drow, believing that her matriarchal theocracy wasted half the Dark Elves' potential. He cultivated secret following among Drow males who shared his resentment, building a countercult that promised equality and power to those who abandoned Lolth. His worship spread quietly through Drow cities for centuries before he judged himself strong enough to challenge Lolth directly. He manifested in the demon web pits with army of divine servitors and mortal champions, intending to kill his mother and claim her portfolio for himself. Lolth had known about Vairon's plotting for decades before he moved openly. She allowed his cult to grow specifically to identify which Drow males possessed the ambition and capability to threaten her rule. When he finally attacked, she was prepared with countermeasures he had not anticipated. The battle between mother and son raged across multiple sections of the demon web, both combatants wielding divine power that reshaped reality with each strike. Vairon fought brilliantly, demonstrating why he had achieved godhood despite his youth. But Lolth fought as both goddess and demon lord, accessing powers from two different sources simultaneously. When Vairon exhausted his divine strength, she struck with abyssal magic he had no defense against. She tore his divine essence from his failing form and consumed it, absorbing his power and his portfolio into her own being. The consumption strengthened her own godhood while simultaneously eliminating the most significant threat to her rule over the Drow. Vairon's divine essence granted her expanded influence over domains he had claimed, including thievery, stealth, and male Drow. Rather than waste these new capabilities, she integrated them into her existing portfolio, becoming goddess not just of dark elves in general, but of all aspects of drow existence. The male drow who had followed Vaer on found themselves bereft of divine patron, many of them returning to Lolth's worship because she now represented the only deity offering them spells and divine favor. The attempted coup had failed completely, and Lolth emerged from it more powerful than before. Faith itself became weapon. Lolth's interference in the War of the Spider Queen reshaped drow civilization through manufactured crises that tested their faith beyond any previous limit. She orchestrated the war personally, withdrawing her divine presence from all drow priestesses simultaneously without warning or explanation. For the first time in millennia, Lolth's clerics found themselves unable to prepare spells, their divine connection severed completely. Drow society, built entirely around the assumption of Lolth's constant presence and favor, collapsed into chaos. Matron mothers, who had ruled through divine power, lost their primary source of authority. Rival houses seized the opportunity to settle old scores. Slave races rebelled against suddenly vulnerable masters. Cities descended into civil war as different factions competed for control. The silence lasted for years, during which tens of thousands of drow died in the violence and upheaval. Lolth watched from the demon web pits, observing which priestesses maintained faith despite losing access to divine magic, and which abandoned her when the power stopped flowing. She identified houses whose loyalty proved genuine versus those whose worship had been merely transactional. When she finally restored divine connection, it was selective. Priestesses who had maintained faith received their powers back immediately. Those who had wavered received nothing until they proved themselves through additional trials. Houses that had abandoned her entirely were destroyed, their populations slaughtered or absorbed by more faithful drow. The War of the Spider Queen served as massive purge that eliminated weak elements from drow civilization, while demonstrating that Lolth's followers served her will rather than the other way around. She achieved a unique hybrid status as simultaneously goddess and demon lord, answering to no abyssal authority while maintaining independence from divine hierarchies. Other demon lords could not command her because she retained divine prerogatives that placed her outside standard abyssal power structures. Gods could not judge her because she operated within the abyss where divine authority held no weight. This dual nature granted her freedom that neither pure deities nor pure demon lords enjoyed. She participated in abyssal politics when it served her interests, but could withdraw to her divine portfolio when demon lord conflicts became inconvenient. She maintained temples and granted spells like any deity, while commanding demons like any abyssal prince. The combination made her uniquely difficult to oppose because enemies never knew which aspect she would deploy in any given situation. The demon web expanded annually, consuming adjacent planar space and weaving it into her ever-growing labyrinth. The layer's borders remained fluid rather than fixed, its web strands reaching out into neighboring dimensional space and gradually incorporating new territory into Lolth's domain. She did not conquer this space through military force, but rather through patient extension of her webs, each strand claiming a small section of reality and connecting it to the larger network. Over centuries and millennia, this expansion had increased the demon web's size significantly, making it one of the larger and more complex abyssal layers. The growth showed no signs of stopping, suggesting that given sufficient time, the demon web might eventually stretch across significant portions of the lower planes. The Spider Queen had proven that divinity and demon nature could coexist, that fallen gods need not become powerless, and that worship could flourish even in the abyss when properly cultivated. Her drow followers spread across the multiverse, their cities hidden in darkness, while extending Lolth's influence into realms where most demon lords could never reach. The demon web pits stood as testament to her unique position, a layer that existed nowhere and everywhere simultaneously, connected to more mortal worlds than any other abyssal realm. Lolth had transformed her fall from grace into apotheosis of a different kind, becoming something greater than she had been as mere goddess. The abyss had gained a queen who would never be displaced, and the Dark Elves had bound themselves to her eternally through choices they could never unmake.